About this news hour, I'm Dan Kasahun with the news. The Telegraph continued its streak of misinformation with readers regarding events in Ethiopia. Quoting Ethiopian Prime Minister threatens to stop food aid entering the country. Author Will Brown blatantly misquoted Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia to bolster a preordained narrative in which Ethiopia must be vilified. This translated quotation from Amharic is, of course, a gross manipulation of the Prime Minister's words, which were initially delivered in Amharic. In actuality, the Prime Minister stated his desire to see Ethiopia become food self-sufficient and less dependent on food aid coming from abroad, a noble goal widely shared among the Ethiopian public. What the Telegraph has done in this article goes beyond taking things out of context or misinterpreting the Prime Minister's words. At the same time, insurgents of the TPLF are spared criticism, if not outright praised. The long-time armed group in Somalia region of Ethiopia, Ogaden National Liberation Front (ONLF), congratulates Mustafa Mohammed for his election as president of the state, laying arms to peaceful political struggle after the 2018 reforms in Ethiopia. ONLF now has expressed solidarity to work with the new Somali regional state government. ONLF has just reaffirmed its commitment to effectively contribute share in developing the region. The Ethiopian community in Manchester and its environs gathered for a fundraising event in aid of displaced people in Ethiopia following TPLF atrocious attack on innocent civilians in different states. Speaking on the occasion, Ethiopian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Tafari Malese, had briefed the community on the current situation and challenges facing Ethiopia. He has also taken the occasion to urge the diaspora to stand in unison against the TPLF cohort, which is bent on shattering Ethiopian unity. He also called upon the diaspora to rally behind the ongoing reforms and support Ethiopia's development efforts. The participants of the event, on their part, expressed their solidarity to Ethiopia's reform process and vowed to strengthen the network established to help the displaced along with the government of Ethiopia. Ethiopians living in the diaspora hail mega projects under construction in Ethiopia, a sign of the future robust growth and prosperity. Members of the Ethiopian Diaspora Task Force visited various mega projects under construction in Addis Ababa. Kasaun Chane has the full account. Take a look.
Members of the Ethiopian diaspora who happen to be in Addis paid a visit to mega projects, including a jaw-dropping beautifying sugar project. Mesmerized by what they saw in the motherland, the diaspora community expressed hope that the country will unleash its full potential to realize growth and prosperity. Apart from supporting the country's development, the diaspora vowed to be ambassadors of their country wherever they go.
These are Ethiopians gathered from more than 20 countries across the world. They are ambassadors of their country. Wherever they go, they are supposed to let the world know the true image of their country.
Commanding government's effort to change the image of the capital, Addis, through such amazing projects, members of the diaspora express commitment to play their part in their country's development end them.
What we've seen today is incredible. We are told that these amazing projects are built by own capacity. The technology they use in the development is remarkable. This country really has a future. I am overwhelmed by what has been done in this country over the past 3 years. Completing such huge projects amidst war and COVID-19 is a success. I hope it will join Korea in Malaysia in the coming few years.
They also called on Ethiopians living in different countries to visit the homeland and support development. Members of the Ethiopian Diaspora Task Force have been visiting various parts of Ethiopia since September and have previously visited the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
ጎሬ ብሎ የተሰየመበት ምክንያት በዚህ በኩል ጎሬ አሁን አስተዳደር ወደሚከደው ላይ ግቢ የሚባል ቦታ ላይ እዛ ላይ ጎራ ብሎ ጣዝማ አገኛሉ። ጣዝማ አገኝቶ ጎራ ብዬ ጣዝማ አገኘው ማለት ነው። በኦሮምኛ ግን ጎሬን ዳሙ አርገዴ ብሏል። ጎሬን ዳሙ አርገዴ ስል ጎሬ አሉት ይባላል። ሰርቦ አረዶ ይባላል። ይሄንን መጀመሪያ እንደዚህ ብሎ ያስወጣ ይባላል።
ኢትዮጵያ ላይ ከተማ የሚለው ቃል ራሱ ሲጀመር ከተመሰረቱት 6 ከተሞች ውስጥ አንዷ የጎሬ ከተማ
Analysts say the Biden administration State Department team is working to escalate the political and economic warfare against Ethiopia. The team is believed to using the same playbook against Ethiopia as they did in Serbia in the 1990s, the main motive being rob Ethiopia of its dominance in the lower Red Sea trade routes. But stable allies such as Ethiopia was and still should be a much preferred choice for the West's interest in the Horn, considering the positive role Ethiopia has been playing in pacifying the region, forging fruitful alliance. Dems Mokrel has reviewed resources to compile the following report. Take a look.
Great powers can cooperate to create stability or allow deepening rifts to tear it apart. Red Sea rivalries, a conflict of interests.
Available data show that more than 1/10 of global trade passes through the southern entrance to the Red Sea. This strategic route is also an important corridor for world navies, which they rely on safe passage to reach the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. Cognizant of such facts, many countries, including the United States, have established a military presence in the Red Sea and invested more assets to the corridor. Analysts say the U.S. regime has been engaging in disturbing countries, particularly disobedient regimes around the Red Sea, to maintain its dominance in the region without any viable competitors. In so doing, U.S. government may some miss victims, a good example being Yemen, which quickly turned into one of the world's largest humanitarian tragedies today.
What we are doing in the Middle East right now is contributing to instability. We are not using our diplomatic or even our non-diplomatic means in order to be able to bring about a new stable order in the region. Instead, we have taken sides, and we have very much decided that the Saudi and the Israeli and the UAE line is correct.
Foreign affairs analyst Grigory Kople argues that Biden administration waged hybrid warfare operations by mid-October 2021 against Ethiopia, hoping to stop its dominating plans in the critical lower Red Sea trade routes. Analysts argue Abiy's reformist posture enabled him to do away with the old authoritarian governing style of Ethiopia's ruling party in the first phase of his leadership.
The protests incited political jostling within the ruling coalition, and you saw a rebalancing power within the ruling coalition and the emergence of a new prime minister by the name of Abiy Ahmed. And Abiy Ahmed has taken on a reformist posture, and he's tried to do away with the old sort of authoritarian governing style of Ethiopia's ruling party.
He was able to open up new chapters for a greater Ethiopia until the U.S. understood his disobedience to be reigned under their will. But bent on dislodging Ethiopia from this position, Biden never hesitated to support Egypt, which entertains a long-standing rivalry with Ethiopia, on top of its support to the TPLF that attacked the northern base of the National Army. The U.S. move was to help the TPLF and the equally violent genocidal Oromo Liberation Front Sheni to help break up Ethiopia. As a result, the Ethiopian government, which had seen Washington as its preferred partner, was forced to reopen talks with China, Russia, and Turkey. China and Russia have been able to prove that they have real leverage in the region by resisting U.S. attempts to have the United Nations Security Council authorize military intervention against Ethiopia. Beijing and Moscow have gained considerable gratitude in Addis Ababa by using their veto powers in the Security Council to delay or block U.S. plans. After observing all those ramifications, analysts who closely follow the Ethiopian affairs appears to agree on some points. But considering the positive role Ethiopia has been playing in keeping the Horn stable, thanks to its peacekeeping missions, a stable economy, and its latest mission of forging a strategic alliance with Horn countries, Ethiopia should still be a much preferred choice, many agree. By overlooking these glaring factors, the Biden administration is pinning hopes on a terrorist TPLF now in a state of desperation. Having been ousted by popular uprising after high-handed domination for close to 3 decades, the TPLF is still toying with a daydream of return to federal power. Given the US's falling out with the group beginning mid-2017, supporting it would be unwise and a Pandora's box, analysts conclude. They further conclude that the U.S. escalation of political and economic warfare against Ethiopia may not be habitable as long as the Biden administration's present State Department team is in place. The State Department sources admit privately that they are using the same playbook against Ethiopia as they used during the U.S. Clinton administration against Serbia in the 1990s. But they all forget one thing in common: the dynamism of time, which at that time put U.S. as a strategically far stronger country as compared to China, Russia, and Turkey, who were far weaker during the time.
The United States government has designed African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGWA, aiming to stimulate low-income African countries to export products duty-free to the United States market. At the beginning of 2000, AGWA invites some 34 countries in Africa, including Ethiopia. The relation between Ethiopia and the United States is soaring. The latter is threatening the East African nation to eliminate it from AGWA initiative due to the Tigray crisis. Low-income Ethiopians who have been approached by ETV said Ethiopia's elimination from AGOA will bring negative socio-economic impact. Let's take a look.
Ethiopia has been one of the major beneficiaries of AGOA, which has led to the growth and development of many manufacturing industries, particularly in the textile, apparel and leather.
ላንቱ ለገሞ ባላለው 4 አመት ሆኖብኛል 4 ልጆች አሉኝ ይሄ ፋብሪካ የሚጠፋ ከሆነ እኔ የሚኖርበት ተይና ልጆቼን የሚያስቀምጥበት ቦታ አይታየኝም ለኔ እንዴት ሆናለሁ ይሄው 4 አመት ሙሉ እዚህ እየሰራው ነኝ በሱ ያስተዳደርኩ ነኝ እንዳይዘጉ አንዴ ለምናለሁ ስሜት ዋበሻ ባባላለው ኢንዱስትሪያል ፓርክ ስራ መስራት ከጀመርኩ 4 አመት ከ6 ወር ሆኖኛል ስራ ሲከፈት ይሄን ስራ አግኝቼ መስራት ጀመርኩ ሁለት ልጆች አሉ ጠዋት ተነስቼ በጠዋቱ ቁርስ እሰራለሁ ልጄን ቀስቅሼ አጣጥቤ ወደ እናቴ ቤት ይዤ እመጣለሁ የቤት ክራዩም የወተት ክራዩም ሁሉ ነገሩን እኔ ነኝ የምሸፍነው እኔማ በተለይ ከተዘጋማ እኔ ቀኑ ነው የሚጨልምብኝ ቀኑ ይጨልምብኛል እኔ በተለይ ቀኑ ይጨልምብኛል
ወጣቱ ከሌላ አገር እንኳን የመጣ እየሰራ እየተጠቀመ እየተማረ ነው ያለው ዛኛ እንደው ከወንዶች ሴቶች ናቸው አሁን የተከበሩና ጥቅም ያገኙ ያሉት ትርፍ ሰዓታቸው እየተማሩ እያደጉ ነው
እኔ እንጃ እኔ መናገር ቃላት ያጥሩኛል ከተዘጋ ከኔ ጋር የሚሰሩ አሉ አካል ጉዳተኞች አሉ ይሄ ሁሉ በዚሁ የሚተዳደረው እና ባካቸው አትዝጉ ብዙ ችግርተኞች ብዙ የተጎዱ ጉዳተኞች አሉ ስለዚህ ባካቸው አትዝጉ ከዘጋችሁ ምን ተዳደርበት ቦታ የለንም ምን ተዳደርበት ስራ የለንም እና ባካቸው አትዝጉ
The African Growth and Opportunity Act was really a great opportunity for African countries to export their products to the United States market duty-free. Almost 34 countries were invited to this initiative when AGOA was introduced. How much Ethiopia has been achieved from this initiative and what will it lose if it is expelled from this pact? Here with me is Professor Malaku Desta. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
Professor Malaku Desta is Professor of International Economic Law. Tell us about how much Ethiopia has been achieved from this great opportunity to export its products to duty-free to the United States market.
Ethiopia has benefited quite significantly over the past few years in particular, but if we are going to compare it with the potential that Ethiopia could have exported using the AGOA opportunities, I would say it's still quite limited. When AGOA was introduced in 2000 during the Clinton administration, I remember looking at the data, and Ethiopia's exports annually at the time was in the region of some $10 million a year. Right now, I think that figure stands well over $300 million. So that's a significant improvement, of course, over a long period. Out of that, I understand that something like just under half of the $300 million worth of exports from Ethiopia goes through the AGOA scheme, which means it enters the US market duty-free and quota-free. And this is significant. It is significant because Ethiopia has used the AGOA opportunity as the means of marketing, as a tool to market itself before the foreign investors, for example. It went out to the foreign investors community saying, look, if you are able to produce goods in Ethiopia, you would have duty-free access to the US market right away. And that, especially using the industrial park schemes that we have over the past few years, I think Ethiopia has benefited significantly. But compared to the promise, the potential that it had, I would say it remains minuscule.
But it is a great stride. From the beginning, it was 10 million USD. but now it has reached 300 million. Is it directly related to industrial parks development in the country?
The industrial development scheme, I'm sure, has contributed, because if you look at the type of products in which Ethiopia is doing well, you will see that textiles and apparel, and the leather industry, the leather goods industry, shoes and leather products, they account for a significant portion of that. And those are directly related to the industrial parks, I think, especially textiles. And in terms of textiles in particular, you can see that the employment opportunities created as a result of that is quite significant. It's my understanding that over 200,000 workers are employed in these industrial parks today. So I don't think all of them are necessarily dependent on the AGOA market, but a significant proportion of them are. And when you look at this level of employment, you can look at the forward linkages and the backward linkages. The backward linkages in terms of the availability, the supply of raw materials and services, and then the forward linkages in terms of what the people working there are actually spending their money on. Those are things that you can look at: the transport costs, the education, and other facilities. So I think there is a huge contribution that came because of AGOA.
Ethiopia might be eliminated from this initiative due to the soaring relationship between the United States and Ethiopia. And the loss would be immense in terms of foreign direct investment, and also losing job opportunities for Ethiopian citizens. How do you explain?
No, it will be immense. It will be. You're absolutely right. It will be immense. But I think we have to think of this in context. The U.S. government, since the introduction of AGOA in 2000, it has always conducted an annual review of every beneficiary country. The list expands and contracts. So Ethiopia has been a beneficiary since 2000. Its eligibility has never been questioned until this year. A number of other countries have gone in and out of the AGOA beneficiary list. So if Ethiopia is removed, I don't think it's going to last very long. I think it will come back to the AGOA beneficiary list. But the key here is, if Ethiopia is removed for a short period, even if it might be very short, how do we make sure that that exclusion for the short term does not leave a long-term scar, a long-term damage on the industry? How do we make sure that people who are employed in these industries, for example, are not going to lose their skills? The companies are not going to close down. What alternative markets can we look for them in the meantime? How can we make sure that the government can support these companies and these employees so that they will stay employed, even if that might not necessarily be full-time employment?
So how is this going to be done?
It can be done in many different ways. I understand right now the government's resource might be rather limited, but I would still say a penny spent today would be worth several dollars tomorrow. If the government invests money today, wherever that money comes from, and supports these companies, I think it will be worth every penny, worth all the pain, because it's going to save jobs. It's going to save skilled people on their jobs. They will be available tomorrow. It's always hard to start something new. It is much easier to keep it going, even if we might be making losses in the short term.
Malaku Desta, Professor of International Economic Law. Thank you very much for your candid explanation.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Creating employment opportunities remains a challenge for countries like Ethiopia, where the youth constitutes 70% of the total population. A senior economist who talked to ETV English attributes most of the problems to lack of coordination between universities and the labor industry to produce skilled professionals. Stayo Tamra reports.
The youth in Ethiopia constitute 70% of the entire population, which currently hits more than 110 million. The rapid population growth makes it difficult for the nation to meet employment demands. High unemployment rate, especially for the youth, hinders the East African nation from growing even more. Although universities graduate over 100,000 professionals each year, only a few thousands get employments. In fact, one reason for this is the mismatch between universities' programs and the labor market. The nation's higher institutions therefore need to shift their old trends, a senior economist advises.
Universities should normally, produce professionals that are demanded by the industry. That is the most important thing. So we need to produce professionals that are productive, that are competent enough, and also that can contribute a lot to the nation's economy. So I think they have to focus on this.
Collective efforts of the government and the private sector is said to be vital to address the high unemployment rate in the country.
In order to provide them a job, I think this needs a collective effort, both from the private sector and also from the government side. So the government and the private sector should work hand in hand in order to reduce unemployment rate, which is large in number at this time in point.
On top of this, universities should produce graduates with a very good entrepreneurial skills that enables them to create jobs by themselves.
We should not produce graduates to create employment for them. I think the graduates that we are producing should create a job by themselves. They must have all the required skills, knowledge and attitude that would help them, competent enough in a global labor market. So I think these are some of the issues that our universities should focus on in order to transform Ethiopia.
Mogas also criticizes the government institutions for insufficient use of time, which is negatively affecting the economy. Consequently, the government needs to enhance the productive capabilities of various institutions so that they can contribute to the economic growth aspirations of the new government.
For instance, we are not efficiently utilizing our time for productive purposes. So I think we need to improve the use of our time. We are not guided by plan, and even our leaders, some of our leaders are not well aware of their sectoral plans, and they are not well aware of their employees and their employees' capacities as well. So I think we, as a government, should focus on enhancing the productive capacity of the human resources that the government is having currently.
International Land Coalition Africa stresses the centrality of partnership in protecting land rights and users. At a hybrid press conference from Nairobi, International Land Coalition (ILC) Africa displays plan for protecting community land rights and environmental defenders, which is the first of its kind on the continent. Alula Teklamaram reports.
International Land Coalition Africa held a forum to help provide an opportunity to assess the strengths of partnerships in the face of emerging needs in people-centered land governance. Stakeholders representing international and continental institutions, including the African Union and IGAD organizations, attended the event. Speaking on the occasion, Head of the African Union Commission's Department of Agriculture and Sustainable Development, Janet Edme, said demographic changes and conflict on the continent are the raising concerns on land governance.
Let me start by stating that the African Union has declared 2021 as the Year of Arts, Culture, and Heritage in Africa. The theme aligns with Aspiration 5 of Agenda 2063, which reads an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values, and ethics. The aspiration envisages that Africa should have a strong cultural identity, values, and ethics. Africa should strengthen our cultural identity as a critical factor for Africa's emergence on the global stage. African people as well to be imbued with a sense of their fundamental cultural unity, a sense of a common destiny and African identity and Pan-African consciousness. And an Africa where work is a key ethic and value, where women play an important role. As Africans, land is not only an economic good that can be used to create wealth or traded. Unlike other tradable goods, land is our heritage upon which our culture is built. As Africans, land is also a source of our identity. Land also holds invaluable evidence of our history as Africans.
Meanwhile, ILC Director Mike Taylor said protecting women's land rights is a top priority for Africa and the world.
Our common heritage as humanity of the planet on which we live is not looked after. Local communities have been looking after the land on which they live for generations. And part of empowering them to do that is to recognize their land rights. And I'm talking particularly about indigenous peoples, about pastoralist populations. You'll hear from the African Union shortly and the important role that the African Union and regional economic commissions play in providing guidelines and a framework for land reform.
The Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD, has been walking the road with ILC to guarantee people-centered land governance, but more remains to be done, said Esther Obaiko, land governance expert at the IGAD.
We're taking on the approach of improving the gender architecture, and this means looking at the staffing or the quotas that are, looking at the capacities of those put in those quotas, and if they are not capacitated enough, building their capacity to raise voice on issues of women. So looking at the whole gender architecture of the land sector from both the decision-making and the technical aspect is helping us to do that and to reestablish what that truly means. The other one is to ensure that there is gender-related budgeting or oriented budgeting. If you don't have gender budgeting happen in governments, that means already that is the first point of exclusion.
The platform that counts 76 members in 26 countries said it would bring together the region's actors on land governance, including rural communities and women, to explore opportunities and design new ways of addressing land-based communal violence, famine, and climate change.
African countries want a new system to track funding from wealthy nations that are failing to meet $100 billion annual target to help the developing world tackle climate change. Africa's lead climate negotiator has said the demand highlights tensions ahead of the COP26 climate summit between the world's 20 largest economies, which are behind 8% of greenhouse gas emissions, and developing countries that are bearing the brunt of the effects of global warming. If we prove that someone is responsible for something, it is his responsibility to pay for that, said Tangwa Kahuma, chair of the Africa Group of Negotiators at COP26, the United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow, Scotland, which started on October 31st. In 2009, developed countries agreed to raise 100 billion per year by 2020 to help the developing world deal with the fallout from a warming planet. The latest available estimate from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, shows that funding hit 79.6 billion in 2019, just 2% more than in 2018. That's according to Al Jazeera. Biden administration is working to rob Ethiopia of its dominance in the lower Red Sea trade route, analysts say.